I mean, I've been hunting for years, and that was the first time I've ever heard a buck snort wheeze. But I knew what it was right away. I know how to do it myself, but I'd never actually heard a buck do it. I heard it, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh. I had my bow in my hands, not hung up, and I turned around, and sure enough, here's this shooter 10 yards behind me. And I was like, well, crap, like, I'm not going to be able to turn around and get a shot at him.
Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 288. Allison Rauscher, The Redemption Buck, Finding the Perfect Spot. Support for the Big Buck Registry and the Deer Hunt Podcast comes from -33 Merino Wool Layering System. Timeless natural insulation, keeping you warm on the coldest days while staying breathable and wicking away moisture on the wet ones. Rackology. Everything you need in one bag. Now available at Rural King and Orslin Farm and Home storefronts. Or online at www.rackology.org. Grizzly Ears. The most advanced engineered wireless earbuds for the outdoors. Covert scouting cameras. Remote cameras for hunting, wildlife, and security. And Big Buck merch. You can get cool, high-quality Big Buck t-shirts, long-sleeve t-shirts, and hoodies. And show support for this podcast by visiting BigBuckRegistryMerch.com. That's Big Buck Registry, MERCH.com. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
This is Chancey Walters with Whitetail Adrenaline and Big Buck Ruiner. You're about to listen to my favorite podcast, the Big Buck Registry.
Hi everybody, I'm Michael Waddell with the Ball Inspector TV show, and you're getting ready to listen to another episode of the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hi everybody, I'm Tommy Brandenburg from Bravery Outdoors, and you're about to listen to my favorite podcast, the BBR.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow predators. My name is Jay, and thank you for tuning in to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. For Dusty Phillips and Jim Keller and the entire staff here at the Big Buck Registry, welcome to this week's show. There are a couple things I'd like you to do for us if you could. If you would, please check us out on iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review. With your help, we're going to try and push this show up the iTunes charts. I know we have a lot of listeners out there, and I need you to take some action. I need you to leave a review and subscribe to the show. If you do subscribe, that'll give you access and notification each and every week that a new show is released. You can also access this show in its entirety on YouTube, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and as an Amazon Alexa skill. Go to Alexa and say, Alexa, enable Big Buck Registry. It's all right there for you to access on demand at your fingertips. Regarding the harness program, we have an ample supply of harnesses to give away from our volunteer donors. If you're in need of a full-body harness, please send an email to jay@bigbuckregistry.com. How do you know when you found a good hunting spot? You know for sure that it's a good spot when you kill your first good buck there. Allison Rauscher knows this very well. After doing her ground homework and then picking the right tree in the right spot in the right property, it all came together recently for Allison one evening on a bow hunt in Wisconsin. She downed one of those Wisconsin monarch bucks that most of us have only read about. We discuss in detail how Allison finally put it all together and what pieces of information she'll take with her on the next hunt to try to do it all over again. We'll get to our entire interview with Allison Rauscher in just one moment, but before we do, let's hear from our friends at -33 Merino Wool Products and Jim Keller with the Deer News. Let's talk about a hunter's layering system for a sec. We need to be ready for any weather that Mother Nature throws at us. With the layering concepts that -33 has created with their incredible merino wool products, they've got you covered. The -33's merino wool expedition weight garments will keep you warm on the coldest late season days while regulating and wicking away moisture in a way that only merino wool can do. You see, wool will absorb up to 30% of its weight in moisture with without leaving you feeling wet or clammy, and wool insulates better than cotton or polyester and protects against hypothermia on those late season hunts. And here's another interesting point. You might not think of wool for early season, but with the minus 33 wicking technology, I'll take a lightweight minus 33 base layer any day in warm weather. Merino wool fibers naturally reject any bacteria found in moisture or sweat and gives you double protection against odor as your target buck approaches. Visit www.minus33.com to learn more about Minus 33's layering technology. Use the code BIGBUCK33 to get 10% off your next order.
Now here's Jim Keller with the deer news.
Our first story this week, young Minnesota hunter 11 bags 12-point buck on her very first hunt. This story is from the Fox News website and was posted by Michael Holland. An 11-year-old girl in Minnesota surprised even her father when she bagged an impressive 12-point buck last week. Making the feat even more impressive, it was the young girl's first time shooting on a hunt. Lily Mickelson took the buck down around dinner time on Friday night, Fox 9 reports. She was out on a hunting trip with her father, Luke, and the pair reportedly waited 2 hours before spotting the animal. Lily fired on the buck and managed to hit it in the back, she said, explaining that she had to approach the buck and shoot it a couple of times before it died completely. Meanwhile, Luke told the news outlet he was still in shock over his daughter's achievement, adding that he couldn't have been any more proud. He also claims that when he tells his friends about his daughter's accomplishment, they don't believe him, which is why he keeps a photograph for evidence. Fortunately, it seems that Lily isn't letting her dad's bragging give her a big ego. I just kind of laugh and say, well, I just got lucky, she told Fox 9. Arkansas hunter dead after deer he shot apparently gets up and attacks him. This story is from the Fox News website, reported by Nicole Dara. A hunter in Arkansas died after a deer he shot turned the tables and reportedly attacked him. Thomas Alexander, 66, is believed to have been killed as he was hunting in Yellville, an area roughly 102 miles east of Fayetteville, on Tuesday at about 6:30 p.m., officials said. Alexander shot the buck using a muzzleloader. Keith Stevens, a spokesperson for the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, told Fox News. He apparently went over to the buck and it got up and attacked him, Stevens said. The 66-year-old was able to call his wife and he was transported to the hospital after 8 p.m. He was going to be airlifted to the hospital, but Alexander stopped breathing on the way to the helicopter, so he was driven there in an ambulance. Alexander was pronounced dead at Baxter Regional Medical Center in Mountain Home. It wasn't clear whether Alexander died from the deer attack or due to other medical problems like a heart attack, but hospital officials said he did have puncture wounds when he was admitted. The spokesperson said he doesn't believe an autopsy will be conducted to find out how the hunter died. Stevens told KY3 that about 4 years ago there was a similar incident during which somebody was stuck by a buck's antlers but survived. He said hunters should make sure to wait 30 minutes after shooting a deer before approaching it, as it may not be dead. Stevens said Alexander may have done that, but we just don't know. See deer on the road? Resist the urge to swerve. This story is from the MSN.com website and was reported by Tim Harlow. Motorists can hit any animal anytime, anywhere, but the odds of that happening in Minnesota are higher than in most states. And if it's going to happen, now is the time. Collisions with wildlife occur most frequently in the fall, and the risk to drivers will be the greatest over the next few weeks as deer breeding season reaches its peak, said Barb Keller, a big game program leader with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. Deer by far are the animals most commonly hit, but dogs, cats, squirrels, and rats are frequently hit and killed, according to State Farm's most recent analysis of vehicle-animal crash claims data. The insurance company estimated that U.S. drivers hit 1.9 million animals between July 1, 2018 and June 30, 2019. In Minnesota, drivers have a 1 in 64 chance of hitting an animal, making it the 10th most likely place for such a mishap, State Farm said. Farmers Insurance found Minnesota ranked 6th highest in the nation for roadway animal crashes between September and November, with 56% of claims resulting from collisions with animals filed during those 3 months. As frightening as it sounds, hitting a deer may be the best option. A farmer's survey found that more than 2/3 of drivers believe they should swerve to avoid hitting an animal, but that could lead to a much worse outcome. Deer can change direction quickly, and swerving might not prevent a collision. Swerving might also cause a more significant accident with a tree, guardrail, or another vehicle. Drivers should remain alert in areas marked with deer crossing signs, slow down, stay towards the middle of the road, and if there's no oncoming traffic, use high beams to illuminate the road. The amount of damage often depends on a driver's reaction and whether they slow down rather than the size of the animal, said Holly Anderson, a State Farm spokeswoman. Drivers who strike a deer should move to the side of the road, call law enforcement and their insurance company, and maybe think about what to do with the deer. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry's Deer News. Special thanks to Daniel Applebaum and John Geis for leads on stories this week. For links to the stories featured this week, please check our show notes at www.bigbuckregistry.com. If you have any ideas for future topics or have questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Thanks to Jim Keller for the Deer News. Without further ado, here is Allison Rauscher. Allison Rauscher, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. It's deer season.
It is, and I'm pretty happy. It's the best time of year, but I gotta say I'm already tagged out.
All right, so you're tagged out, and you know what do you do when you're tagged out? It's always this like dilemma, right? You see all these people on Facebook and social media, and it seems like the whole world's tagged out except for you. But you're one of those people this year.
I know. Yeah, now I'm finally one of those. Usually I never tag out this early, but no, this weekend I'll be going to my first collegiate football game, and that I've been to in many, many, many years. And then Sunday I'll be pheasant hunting, and some of my buddies have asked if I wanted to go duck hunting, and so I've got a lot of plans for that kind of stuff, just to get outdoors in general. And then I do have 2 archery doe tags left that I can use. So
Gotcha. All right. I was going to ask you. Okay, so you're tagged out, but what does that mean where you are? What state are you in?
I'm in Wisconsin.
You're in Wisconsin. So what are the rules for the harvest there? So there's always this debate: is it harvest or is it killing?
Well,
what's the tag limit there for different seasons?
I shouldn't say that I'm tagged out, because technically, like, I still have 2 tags. They're just doe tags, but I have punched my buck tag. You get one buck tag, and then and it varies from county to county here, and especially with the CWD units. But I have 2 doe tags to go along with that.
Gotcha.
And then if I wanted, like, you can buy even more of those now, and you get a certain amount for certain counties, and there's kind of all these logistics that work into it. But yeah, so that's what tagged out means.
Gotcha. So there's all kinds. So you're tagged out for bucks, so to speak.
Yes.
But
yep.
You could
Until gun season.
Until gun season. So this is and tell me about kind of how Wisconsin does it, because it sounds like this is an archery kill, right? This is. So you're tagged out for archery. The gun season hasn't even started?
Nope. The gun season will start in a couple of weeks here. That's like over Thanksgiving, and it's a 9-day gun season. So that'll take place at the end of the month. And that's just kind of where, everybody seems to be. I mean, you can't pass a car without seeing blaze orange.
The Orange Army comes alive.
Yeah, that's pretty much Wisconsin in a nutshell.
Yeah, although Wisconsin has such a rich history in hunting, it
absolutely
rivals Michigan or Pennsylvania. I mean, it's really a rich tradition, going back years and years and years. And I mean, not to discredit any of the other states and their hunting traditions, but Wisconsin's one of those states that you just kind of think about bigger deer and rich hunting tradition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, like Wisconsin holds a lot of the records, right, for big bucks. And
I don't know if it's just because more people actually have their deer scored here and entered into the books, or, because you'd think somewhere like Iowa would be number 1. And so maybe it's just that, people in Iowa they're not scoring every single deer, and they're not, entering them into any books. But I think we definitely have more people doing that here.
Yeah, I would think that the records would come in Ohio, Iowa, maybe even like Missouri and But yes,
I've heard Kentucky, Kansas.
yeah, there's some big states that have emerged, but they haven't taken over Wisconsin yet. So I think somewhere down the road that may happen. But yeah, you're right. It's why is Wisconsin historically known this way? I'm not sure we have the answer to that. Probably, like you said, a lot of hunters and people like to get it scored. It might be just something they do.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if it's necessarily that we have bigger deer, but we have the most recorded deer, maybe.
Right.
I don't want to sit here and say, oh yeah, we have big deer everywhere, and then have everybody come and try to hunt here.
Right. Well, yeah, and some spots you don't, but I mean, it's a special state in a lot of ways on the record books, but things change over time, and Wisconsin may not be that state for forever, and it probably has something to do with agriculture too, is my guess, and good genetics, and there are a lot of things that got to happen there, right? That may not happen in other states.
Oh, absolutely. And I think too, so we have a thing here, it's called Wisconsin Rut Report. It's something on Facebook where everybody can kind of post their successful hunts or just what they're seeing and that sort of thing. But I mean, man, between this year and last year, just seeing the amount of bucks being posted that have been harvested they're huge. And I don't know if it's people are just practicing quality management more now than they were back in the day, because I think there was a turn in Wisconsin where there were more meat hunters than trophy hunters. And I'm starting to think that more people are holding off on shooting some of the younger bucks and waiting for them to mature more and really grow into their full potential.
I think there is a sentiment out there and it's a cultural thing and I think social media has something to do with it, where there are more and more hunters getting together, say, hey, you don't have to shoot the 3.5-year-old. You can wait until they're 6.5-year-old, but you just got to be patient to get there. But once you get there, now you get a whole bunch of those 6.5-year-olds, 7.5-year-olds running around.
Absolutely.
So I think there is a sentiment going on that has changed, and I saw a little post the other day. My father's idea of let them grow is much different than our idea of let them grow these days. We were like, another hour on the grill versus we're saying letting another year in the field or another 2 years to let them live and get bigger and mature.
Yep, for sure.
So do you think that's like a social media thing? It seems like that could actually be one of the bonuses of social media. As much as I don't really like social media as a person, like it's not my thing. I recognize it and I know the world's there and we do it for the show and but if I didn't have the show, I'm not sure I'd ever look at Facebook. It's just the way I am. But I also see how powerful it is in this sense, where that might actually be one of the root causes of big deer growing older.
I really think it is. I definitely think it's a factor, and I think that plays into it. But I don't know. Social media is a real powerful tool. I mean, it can be great sometimes, and sometimes it can be absolutely awful.
Right.
But I would say that I would say it's a factor.
It seems like
it certainly doesn't. And here's where I disagree though too, because I mean, growing up, I watched Outdoor Channel all the time with my dad, and I remember growing up before social media was really big. Before hunting, there was I feel like hunting as a whole has its own little world on social media. And I think before that ever came along, like I was still hunting big deer. Like, and my dad used to tell me all the time that I needed to stop hunting for TV deer because I was always waiting out for, the biggest buck that was on the property. And
right.
So I think, that's kind of where I disagree, because I think that's how I was even as a kid.
So you're saying it goes back further, like it may have been the roots of some of the early
media in general, maybe
starting with the early television of these hunting shows. You're saying it goes back even further, where they're not just hunting and killing; they're hunting and hunting for the bigger deer, which really,
possibly.
Yeah, I mean, in reality, that is more of a hunt, right? When you're hunting for the bigger deer, you're hunting for a specific animal. That's more of a hunt than just going out there to shoot whatever shows up.
Well, and it's not even just that they're a bigger deer. It's a older, more mature, smarter deer that has, escaped harm for years, and, eventually if you're lucky enough, you can catch up with them. But I mean, I really do think that they're very smart animals, and I think their survival skills are I've seen them firsthand. It's insane what they can live through.
Yep.
And so I think just the challenge of that in itself it speaks for itself.
Yeah. I'm always amazed at how the big deer find their hiding spots and know intrinsically, after trial and error of almost dying many times, that this is the safest spot in the woods when those guys start showing up in their orange and when they feel where they go when they feel pressure. It's really, really interesting. Once you scout those areas, like, this is brilliant.
Absolutely.
Like, you couldn't plan this out, but you, as a human, you recognize, wow, boy, they are really, really keen survivalists. Like, they have to figure this out in order to become this big.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
But once
and that's what makes it so exciting is, just trying to outsmart a smart deer that's made it as long as he has.
Right. And how giddy do you get when you're in one of those zones? You're like, wow, this is the spot. I found the secret right here.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Oh, and that's how it was this year. I mean, I found a spot and I just knew immediately, like, I was like, I know they're bedding around here. They're going to use this as a travel corridor. There's going to be rubs and scrapes in here any minute now. Like, I knew that there was going to be deer in there. I just didn't know how big of deer were in there.
Right.
So
I'd like to hear about kind of how you discovered that spot and talk about some pressure in a little bit. But let's go back a ways. You'd mentioned that you used to watch hunting shows with your dad. How did hunting come into your life in the very first, aspects of hunting? How were you introduced to it?
I mean, from a really young age. I mean, my dad obviously hunted when I was growing up, and I don't even remember how old I was, but I was taking pictures with my dad's deer and his animals for as long as I can remember. There's pictures of me at probably like 3 and 4 years old holding on to his deer and pretending they were mine. And I think it was just, I grew up around it. And so it was just, that was the world. And so I didn't really know anything different. And like I said, I remember would watch, back when shows or there would be shows on VHS, and we would watch those, and then Outdoor Channel, and I just kind of grew up into it. And then when I was 9, he took me out for the gun season with him. He took me out when I was younger than that, but I don't really remember a whole lot of that. I was too young. I do remember, like, when I was probably 4 or 5, we went and sat on a farm, and I remember seeing all the deer, but I was, I couldn't sit still for very long by any means. But then when I was 9, we went on a hunt up north for the 9-day gun season, and that was the first time that I actually really saw anything die. I had never, up until that point, like, I had seen the animals dead, but I had never seen one actually expire. And so then when I was 9, I went with him, and he shot a little, I talked him into shooting a little spike just because I wanted to see, something.
Yep.
And so that was kind of the first thing that I was like, okay, yes, like, this is, and he took me through the whole process. Like, he didn't let me just see, the most exciting parts. Like, I was there helping with skinning and butchering. I mean, I wasn't holding the knife, but I remember, like, carrying the meat inside to the rest of our family, and we were all cutting up deer, and they were teaching me how to do it. And then when I was 12, I went through my hunter safety course, and I got my first bow. It was and whenever I talk about it, nobody knows what kind of bow it is. It was a Youth Jennings.
Yeah,
which was
sure.
not
Jennings, sure.
okay. Yep.
Yep.
So I feel like nobody's ever heard of that company. But
Well,
so I had a little
these
youth
days, no, nobody knows what Jennings is. But back then, that
Yep.
Jennings was a big deal.
Yep. So I got a little youth Jennings, and then my first hunting season, I shot a doe with it, and I was hooked ever since. So I haven't missed a season, and bow hunting whitetails is by far my biggest passion in the hunting world. I don't do a whole lot of duck hunting. I don't do a whole lot of anything else. This time of year is when I want to be in a tree stand. So
Gotcha. So your
that's how far back.
it sounds like you had some good roots there. And was your dad a big influence in your life when it came to that? It sounds like it.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
My dad and then both my grandpas. Both my grandpas hunted, and but I mean, obviously, I think my dad definitely was the biggest influence for sure.
Gotcha. Okay. So you've got a rich tradition in your family. It sounds like, I mean, grandpas, you got your dad. You're talking about Jennings bows. My first bow was like this one. I actually spent $55 of my own like lawn mowing money that I had saved up, and I bought it from Sears. You ever heard of Sears?
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
I've heard of Steve.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know,
And I remember, like, I mean, I think by the time I was born, they probably didn't do it as much anymore. But I remember seeing like some of the older catalogs that like they even sold guns and
right. The Sears,
all that stuff.
The Sears of today is not the Sears of what it was back in the early 80s. You know, that's not what it is today. But yeah, back then, I mean, I bought fishing motors, you know, boat motors, little boat motors, guns, and I have some guns that were bought out of a Sears catalog. They're actually Sears branded firearms. They're antiques now. I mean, by a long shot. But you know, I bought my first bow and arrow out of the Sears catalog, and it came, you know, it got shipped to my house. It was pretty neat. And this, I think I was like, how old was I in 1983? That you know, I was 11 years old. And my parents had no idea what I was doing, but I was doing it. You know, that I was like, no, I want to learn how to archery hunt, and I want to learn how to shoot a bow because I'd started watching it on TV, like you had described. Like, that's the coolest thing. I need to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
So, big advancements since the Jennings days and since the Sears catalog of archery. So you've progressed a lot. I mean, you've killed some big bucks. This year's buck was just a stud. I mean, just unbelievable.
Yeah. He's my biggest to date. I've never shot anything even remotely close to him. Like, everything that I shot, like, I was telling somebody the other day, they didn't believe me, but I was like, I've never ever scored any of the other deer that I've shot. Like, not that I wasn't interested in it, but it just, like, to me, I don't know. Like, I just never felt like those deer were, they weren't record book deer. And so, you know, I was just happy to have a set of antlers. And I got more and more excited when I advanced from an 8-pointer to a 10-pointer. That was enough for me. So I think just this buck that I shot this year means more to me than anything, just because of the work I put in to get him. And last year I had a little bit of a heartbreak with a buck very similar to him. So it's kind of one of my buddies referred to him as my redemption buck.
Right. Well, that's a good way to look at it. Redemption buck.
Yeah.
I want to get into the story itself, like the play-by-play of the actual hunt, but it sounds like there's a lot of prep work that went into this, and it sounds like the prep work that you did was not just something you did like a light switch this year. It sounds like the things that you've learned over the years kind of went into this moment. So I'd like to go back a ways and get into some of the things you might have learned over the years, strategies and techniques that you've developed to get to the point where you could actually kill a big buck in Wisconsin, in one of the bigger hunting states in the country as far as pressure is concerned. Where does this start? Where does this story start in your mind?
Oh man. I mean, I would I would say going back to, when I was 12.
Okay.
Everything I learned was when from the moment I started hunting, my dad was teaching me, everything about signs and, there were always teaching moments throughout the season.
Yep.
And so it started with that, and some of it was things that I didn't necessarily learn from my dad. Some of it was stuff that I learned on TV or things that I looked up on the internet or read about in other areas. Like we always got different magazines. And so just picking up different strategies like that, like learning how to call. My dad, I remember, like, my dad just sent me into the woods with a grunt tube and a can call.
Yep.
And didn't really tell me how to use it in the beginning, and eventually, or the can call, I remember he showed me how to use that. But other than that, like, I'd never really knew how to grunt, and so I would watch like YouTube videos. I can't remember. There was one that I always watched. I can't remember who has it up there. But I learned how to grunt from that and the different ways to grunt and what that means. And so those sort of things, figuring out, bedding areas versus feeding areas, funnels, all that sort of thing. That's kind of all been things that I have picked up over the years. But I try to keep things as natural as possible.
Okay.
I don't do a whole lot of mock scrapes. I don't do a whole lot of staged bedding areas. I don't do, I try to find those spots and adapt to them instead of trying to make them adapt to. I mean, it's easier. I personally find it to be easier to adapt my hunt and adapt my scouting to, the signs that they're putting out. So that's kind of, not that how I learned, but, well, yeah, I guess I could say that is how I learned. That's just what my dad did. And so then that's kind of the way I prefer to do it.
Yep.
And sorry, go ahead.
You're not overcomplicating this. You're not doing a lot of extra things to try to draw them in. You're trying to figure out through scouting techniques where they're going, where they're living in any particular year. Does that sound right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And I mean, that's an all year long thing for me. Like, especially in the last however many years, like even during shed season, like I use what I see during shed season or the shed season, I guess, if you want to call it that.
Yep.
To figure out where those deer are. And even then, like sometimes that's not always accurate, but it gives you an idea that, okay, the deer are living here and they're not just using it as like a way to pass through to a different area or, there's just certain things you learn or notice. They seem to travel the same paths or, and even just give you an idea of what's in there when you do find sheds. So that's my favorite way to do it.
Gotcha. So this is not gimmicky. This is hard work, foot on the ground, trying to just figure out where the population is at that moment. And based off of how do you, I mean, it's one thing to figure out where the deer are living, but it's another thing to figure out if within where those deer are living is a big buck amongst them. Does that go into your concern, or are you just trying to get to where the majority of the deer are? In other words, are you targeting a specific buck, or at least targeting that there's a big buck in there because you've seen some sign?
No, and I can't. I mean, I wish I could say that's the case, but like the buck that I ended up shooting this year, I had no idea. I had no previous experiences. I shouldn't say that. I had his shed from the season before, but his shed from the season before doesn't even reflect his size a year later. So, I mean, the shed that I found was like, oh yeah, that's going to be a nice deer. But I didn't realize how nice he was actually going to be. And so it's like, this past year, I knew that there were big bucks in that area. I just didn't know, how big. And I put out trail cameras, and I feel like I really didn't get a good idea until early season.
Okay.
Is probably when I got the most bucks on camera, nocturnal and in daylight. So that was probably my best indication, but I also don't think, like this year specifically, I think I just set up my cameras in poor areas. I mean, I set it, one of them in the beans and soybeans, which usually, obviously deer flock to those during the early months. And, but I never got a whole lot of really big deer on camera. There were definitely 2 of them that I was like, oh yeah, like these are good deer. I definitely would shoot one of these if they walked by. But in comparison to the one I shot, they aren't quite as mature, I would say. So I think there's more deer in there. I've always felt this way, but I think there's always more and bigger deer on a property than what anybody realizes at times, because I do feel like the bigger and more mature bucks have such a smaller area that they will roam, that unless you get into those areas, you'll have no idea that those bucks are even there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it was with me. Like there was an area that I hadn't even touched, and I found a spot right above it where I knew that the bucks I knew that they'd be bedding up there. I knew that would be a travel corridor. And I had just discovered that this past, like in the middle of the season. I had never walked over there before, and lo and behold, here's this buck living there for probably 5 or 6 years, and nobody probably has ever laid eyes on him before.
They're good at hiding. They really are.
Which is insane for not that they're in Wisconsin, they're pretty big, but it's just amazing how discreet some of these bucks can be, especially with a set of antlers that they have.
Right. Yeah, it is funny how, unlike younger deer, unlike does, they do not like to expose themselves, especially through travel corridors. They're not. It's like if there's any kind of broadness or openness to the area, like they're like, no, that's not where I'm going to go today.
Yeah.
But enclose it, have good access points to and from these areas where doe might be hanging out. That seems to be where they go. But if you were just to stand back and watch, you might not ever see them. Even when they're moving, you might not see them because it's in these hidden corridors that you can't really get to unless you get into those corridors.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. And I've seen, even like in Maryland, for example, I've seen firsthand where baiting is legal, right? And they check the cameras over the bait. And sometimes they get big bucks on there. But I went and hunted there, and they told me to check a camera before I got on the stand. I did. There was like 500 pictures of foxes, raccoons, doe, smaller bucks, turkeys, but no like 170 class deer or better.
Yeah.
However, the evening that I'm sitting in the stand, I see a 170 class deer on the opposite side of the field that never came close to the bait pile in a week. They for some reason, they understand that I don't need to go to that bait pile. I'm not going to that bait pile. I don't care. All you youngins can go over there, but I am not. I'm going to go where it's safe, and I'm going to go rub this tree down here, and you can watch me all afternoon, but I'm not coming near your stand.
Yeah, yep.
And it's so that's what they do. And he walked the edges, walked in the thickest, gnarliest stuff that field held. And so you would never know that buck was there on camera because he's not on camera. The only reason I knew that is because I saw him absolutely maneuvering stealthily along the edge and into the thickest stuff. The only reason I could see him is because I could see his antlers moving. But I didn't, you couldn't see him any other way.
Yeah, yeah.
So you remove all that. The visual was just by luck. The camera obviously was not a good indicator. So how do you figure that out? Well, the way you figure it out is by sign, it seems like. You've got to read the sign. Mm-hmm. It could be sheds, like you talked about. It could be footprints. Could be droppings, rubs, scrapes. Those seem to be the things that would be better at indicating whether I should hunt there or not than even a sighting or anything that you can't really trust the camera is what it comes down to, even though sometimes it works. But like I have just described, oftentimes it doesn't.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a false negative, I guess, is what they would call it in science, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So how did you discover this area? I'm curious. I'm fascinated that you were able to find an area that held a big buck, and it sounds like this was not something that was necessarily expected, but you're onto something. And I also suspect that you're taking in a lot of information about, okay, I got this to work right this time. What did I learn?
Yeah. I think, oh man, I had a hang-on set above what looked like a main trail that all these deer were using. And I had a trail camera right below it. And I was, checking that on every other week or so. Anytime I would go in and hunt pretty much. And I wasn't seeing much when I was actually sitting. But I would look through the trail camera pictures and I was seeing all these deer, but, and at the beginning of the season, earlier in the season, I had a couple big bucks on camera, but nothing it just seemed like all of a sudden they just disappeared.
Yep.
And I was like, well, they're going somewhere. Like they're, this is where they were. And now they're sticking it into a different area. And I didn't know if it was because, initially I thought that they were living in the corn. I wholeheartedly believe that. And then as soon as, the winds started picking up and, just fall was in full swing, I think they really moved into the timber. So then fast forward to a couple weeks ago, they started cutting the corn, and they didn't get very far with that, but I just kind of was like, all right, now officially, those deer they're not in the corn anymore. They're probably in the timber, but I'm not seeing them in the hang-on that I'm in. So they're somewhere. And this property is only so big. There's only so much timber, which actually there's quite a bit of timber. It's pretty extensive. And it actually, I'm trying to word things because I don't want to give too much away, because I'm sure there's some people that'll be like, oh yeah, I know where that is.
Oh, I see. Yep. So
but
don't want to give the coordinates. I get it.
No, not at all. And somebody, I posted on Instagram, what people wanted to know about the buck that I got, and everybody was like, coordinates, and I was like, absolutely not. So anyway, there was an area where the property went back even farther. And I was like, I don't think I've even ever touched that area. So I'm going to walk over down this main trail and just see where it goes. And I had I ended up borrowing a climber from someone, and cause I was getting really frustrated. Not that, hang-ons are mobile, and I had a ladder stand too, and I didn't mind, I don't mind being mobile with those, but I also don't want to remove myself from an area that I know is either good at the time or it's going to be good.
Right.
And especially with that hang-on, I was like, I know that's going to be a good spot come rut. I'm not going to move it. That needs to stay there. So I ended up borrowing a climber because I was getting frustrated not being able to be mobile. And so I took that climber and I just kept going down that trail and kind of followed it further back into the property and into some thicker stuff. And eventually I came up on this hill, and that was kind of where I found it. And I sat there one night, and I only saw a doe and a fawn that night, but I was like, I still know that there's going to be deer in here. There were some tag alders up there. There were it was nothing but thick brush and immature trees. And
good bedding, it sounds like.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Is this?
And then there's
a
spot.
Is this a public piece or a private piece of land?
I'm sorry, private.
Private. Okay.
Yep. But there's one other person that hunts it with me with his son. And then my dad just started hunting it as well.
Okay.
But anyway, so beyond that thick area, there was like a point that came out, and I knew, like, I had a feeling there were deer, possibly bucks, bedding on that point, because I could see one bed, and then and I just know, they like to bed up against things that, they can have their back to it and just see everything out in front of them.
Yep.
So, so I was like, I really think there's got to be some deer that are going to be either bedding in here or cruising through here, because that ridge kind of ran along this whole the whole back side of the property almost, and the side of the property.
All right. Yep.
So it was, it was funneled in some areas, and just all around kind of a great spot for them to cruise along the hillsides. So, yeah, that's how I came upon that. I didn't really know it was there. I use Onyx a lot. Onyx Hunt.
I love Onyx. It's been a game changer.
It is. I've used it for many, many years now. Probably, I don't know, but I love everything that they've done with it. They, like, even in just the last year, they've changed a lot that has really made it even better.
Yeah.
But so I use the hybrid layer where it shows you, like, So I kind of looked at that, and I mean, I used a bunch of different, like I said, I'm trying to, like, say it so I don't give it away.
Don't give it away, right?
But there was another spot around that I had also hunted, and so, and I knew that there were also larger deer on that property as well. So I kind of tried to get close to that property and kind of cover several pieces of ground where maybe there were numerous bucks in that area that, maybe they didn't live on this property, but they'd be going through it. So,
gotcha.
So yeah, that was another kind of strategy that I used, trying to kind of put myself in the middle of all that, and that area was kind of that spot.
So you were reading the Onyx maps, and you knew that the property boundary line was somewhere in there, but the bucks, you knew that the bucks were on the other property too, and
I knew where they bedded on the other property. And I knew, yeah.
And they cross over. They don't know boundary lines. They could care less.
No.
They know terrain and safe spots. But but to you, you're like, I've hunted that spot and I assume you need to, like, get permission to hunt some of these spots because it's private land. You're like,
yep.
I knew that property. Now I know this property, and if I can get close enough to that other property where I always thought the deer were bedded, and I come in on the backside, it's got to be something going on there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Gotcha. Very cool. So you discovered this one spot where you decided to set up. What was the aha moment?
Probably the first night that I actually put a permanent stand there. It was a day that I talked my dad into coming out with me, and I was like, I've got a great spot in mind of where we could put a stand, and I think it's going to be really good. And we got up there, and sure enough, like, there was a scrape, or there were two scrapes, and I mean, the trails up there were even more pounded down.
Yeah, more pronounced.
So, and my dad agreed. He was like, yeah, he's like, this could be really good. So we put up a stand up there, and I sat it literally that night. I mean, we had set it maybe an hour before, and I went and sat it, and that night I had a doe and a buck. Gosh, I wish I could remember the date, because it was like the Saturday. It was the Saturday before Halloween, whatever day that was.
So that would have been, let's see, that would have been the 26th of October.
There was definitely some pre-rut activity going on where there was like a doe getting chased by a little buck. He came through grunting, and then I had another, like, little 8-pointer come through chasing a doe and a nubbin buck, and, like, there was just, like, there was that kind of good sign, and And then this 5-pointer comes up and is just kind of like milling around my stand. And I was so focused on watching him at the time. I really didn't know, I didn't know what I was going to see. And all of a sudden I hear this snort wheeze behind me and I'm like, oh my gosh, like if something's like, first of all, it was the first time, I mean, I've been hunting for years and that was the first time I've ever heard a buck snort wheeze.
Right. It's a rarity.
I knew it.
It's unusual to hear one.
It is. But I knew what it was right away.
Yep.
Like I know how to do it myself, but I'd never actually heard a buck do it.
Right.
So I heard it and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh. So I think I had my bow in my hands, not hung up. And I turned around and sure enough, here's this shooter 10 yards behind me. And I was like, well, crap, like I'm not going to be able to turn around and get a shot at him. And, ears were pinned back and he was just pissed at this 5-pointer and he went to charge him and then kind of like veered off and took back off into some of the thicker brush. And that was kind of my first
that was your first hunt in this spot.
Yeah, first
Wow.
hunt. We literally just hung this stand and I saw a shooter right off the bat. And this was even that buck that I saw was a buck that I didn't have on camera. So that got me all sorts of excited. And so then I wanted to hunt that more. But of course I had, work just gets in the way all the time.
It
so
does. Now you're a nurse, right?
Yeah. And unfortunately, I work 12s. So even when I'm done with work, I can't head out to the stand. It's dark by the time I'm done with work. So then my dad actually sat up there a couple of days. And he's going to roll his eyes when I tell this, but he sat it a couple of days and he saw movement elsewhere. So he asked me, he's like, can I move the stand again? I saw this buck take, I think he saw one of the shooters at one point, but I don't know. But he was telling me he was seeing deer movement elsewhere. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I'm thinking that he's going to just move the stand down a little ways, on top of that flat.
Yeah.
Well, he ended up moving it down into this ditch, and so then the next time that I was able to hunt, I went and sat it, and it was, there wasn't much for shooting lanes, and I was like, oh, if any of those bucks come up, they're gonna come off that flat, and they're gonna almost skyline you right away, or they're gonna spot you.
Yeah.
The smart ones will anyway.
Right.
And sure enough, that night, again, I ended up seeing what I think is the buck that I ended up shooting. It was too thick. From where I was sitting, you couldn't really see into the thick stuff. So I think it was the buck that I ended up shooting, but I saw him that night too. And that was another time when I was just this stand, this is the spot. It might not happen tonight. It might not happen tomorrow, but eventually, if we're just in the right place at the right time and one of those bucks happens to walk by, we're going to be able to get it done.
Gotcha. So you're down in the ditch now and for an archery shot, you're feeling that this is just a little too thick for the way you would prefer to have it with some shooting lanes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
And just the fact that, I was more worried about them seeing or spotting movement or, if they started coming off that flat, you wouldn't have any time to get ready, really. That's how thick it was up there. You would have to be ready constantly because if they came off that hill, suddenly they're 15 yards in front of you. So it was I kind of wanted to be up top just because I knew they would be traveling up there. And not only that, but I wanted more shooting area and more time to get ready, really.
Gotcha. So what did you decide to do?
So I basically threw a fit.
Your dad's going to love this.
He's going to love it. But no, I threw a fit and I was like, we can't have the stand here. We got to move it back to where it was. I said, I'm moving it tomorrow. And that was the Wednesday before Halloween, the day before. And so I said, I'm moving it tomorrow. And he's like, I'll come out and help you. And he was actually getting ready to head down to Kansas So I felt bad kind of taking his time away from that, but it was just, a miscommunication on my part mostly, but
Yeah.
I just wanted it up top where, it was going to be close to the bedding, but I was like, I know there's going to be deer traveling through there.
And
So we moved it back.
How far away is the distance between the ditch and the stand site?
From where it was originally, probably 30 yards or so. And I mean, not far at all, but it was just enough to where you're pretty blocked off, and it's a steep enough drop that it's like you wouldn't be able to shoot up onto the flat at anything that was up there.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, that's kind of one of the other issues that I had with it too. I mean, if I wanted to shoot something up on top, it would have to be right on the edge, or, it wasn't a situation where I could have shot up there.
Gotcha. All right. So you can't see up there, can't really shoot up there either.
No.
All right.
So we ended up moving it back to where it originally was, on Halloween.
Okay.
About midday.
This is a ladder stand you're using?
Yeah, this one was a ladder stand.
Okay. And how'd you decide on that tree? Was it just the best tree in the mix in that one spot?
Yeah, like one that would give us enough cover. Because some of the trees would really open up, so you'd kind of like stick out like a sore thumb towards the top. And this one was a really thick tree. It had, several big branches that would come out, and you just were more well hidden no matter where the deer were coming at you. And then there was a trail that kind of came through. There were 2 scrapes right off that trail. So it was like, either they're going to hit a scrape here, they're going to hit a scrape here. We were kind of trying to imagine every possible scenario of when one of these bigger bucks might come out to check out either a scrape or go to bed or head out towards a food source. So
gotcha. All right. So you've had this little argument with your dad, in a sense, that where you moved it, Dad, in the ditch is not where it needs to be. The shooting lanes are horrible. Yes, you saw a deer, but you can't get a shot down there. We're putting it back. Yep. And your dad, being dad, said, "All right, I'll help move it back."
I think, yeah. I felt bad. Like after I threw my little fit about it, then I apologized to him the next day, and I was just like, I'm sorry. And I was already mad when I threw the fit because I left my grunt tube in the car. And of course, I saw that shooter. And so even I tried to grunt just using my voice,
right,
which was awful and hilarious because my voice is not that deep. So of course I saw that shooter, and I couldn't get him to come in to my voice grunting. So then that just made me even more mad. So, but yeah, so the next day I was appreciative that he, helped me move that stand. And cause I think not because I know I could have done it on my own, but I was worried that with it being the rut picking up, I wanted every moment to count. And that was one thing that I told my dad the night before, after I threw the fit, I was just I'm just frustrated because you put in so much time, you put in so much effort and hard work, and now it's finally this time, and this is when every little thing counts.
Right.
So, so I said, I don't want to mess it up. I want to make it count. So, so yeah, we ended up moving it, and that's the tree and the stand that I ended up shooting that shooter out of. So
okay, all right. Well, let's break down the day of the kill. I really want to find out how this all played out throughout the day. We've got the backstory. We got the movement of the stand and how it wasn't in the right spot, and how you picked the right tree. So we've got kind of the picture of how this whole area was discovered and why you picked that one spot to begin with. But I want to hear how it all plays out on the day of the actual kill.
So I had hunted that morning, and I knew it was going to be an interesting day and probably a good day for movement because it was actually snowing here in Wisconsin. By the time that I was in my stand, I think we had probably got about 2 inches of snow already. I mean,
Wow.
there was a heavy layer like within the woods, which made it gorgeous walking in early in the morning, when it's still dark, but man, you can really see in the woods when there's snow on the ground.
Oh, yeah. Snow and deer hunting is the best.
It is. It's, which, you have, it's like a love-hate relationship because it's so beautiful, but oh my goodness, you get cold quick if you don't have the right equipment.
Right. But boy, do the deer stick out.
Yes, that too. And that's kind of, I think, what ultimately helped my situation. I think that's what really got the buck on its feet earlier too.
Yep.
Because, I mean, the snow was coming down all day long, and I think it stopped probably around 3 o'clock or so. And then I spotted him at 5 o'clock. But anyway, so I walked in the snow, and like I said, there was a heavy layer already, like just on the trees and on the ground. And so I sat the stand in the ditch in the morning, and all I saw was a spike. I didn't see much of anything. And like I said, the snow was still coming down, and I sat there till about 10 o'clock. And then I decided to head out, and that's kind of when my dad came around and moved the stand, but it was still snowing, so I kind of was like, I don't think anything's going to really move during the day with the snow falling still.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, I was like, rut's not in full swing. It's still really early, and I really think if they would have been moving, it would have been late morning. And I didn't see anything. So I waited. I actually ended up just like staying at the property, and I slept in my car, took a little nap, and then I went in around 2:30, and it kind of it eased up a little bit, and I was in the stand. I was in the stand by 2:30, and then it stopped snowing around 3 o'clock. And so then I probably waited another hour or so, and all of a sudden I saw a doe and a nubbin buck come in, and along with a little 8-pointer that was following behind him, and he was grunting at him and chasing him around, and finally he took off on his own, and the doe and nubbin buck just kind of hung around and milled around, and they were eating, and so I got busy watching them just because that's half the fun for me, is just being able to watch the deer like that. I just love watching them. So,
it's a thrill. I mean, just to see their behavior and their mannerisms, see what they're going to do next and how they interact with each other. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, and just like the different, you can tell, like just their, like you said, their mannerisms and their behaviors, like certain things they'll do that it almost alerts you that like, oh, okay, there's another deer coming, or it's just cool to see how they interact with each other. But I was having fun just watching them, and about an hour goes by, and all of a sudden I turn around because I could see the doe like kind of picked her head up and like looked over across the flat, and it was like a sudden like head or like a whiplash almost, and so I looked over where she was looking, and sure enough, here's this buck walking in. And my heart just starts going out of my chest. Like, I was like, oh crap, like, okay, I need to be ready. So, and I had already had my bow in my hands because I knew, like, as soon as that snow stopped, I knew there were going to be deer on their feet, and I knew they were going to be moving. And I just felt like every second's going to count here.
What time of day was this again? This was
5 o'clock. 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
5 o'clock. You're in your stand. How far away is the buck at this point?
At that point, he was probably 50, 60 yards.
60 yards. And what degree was it? Like, was it 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock?
Oh, he was at like 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock. Okay.
But he was he was in that thick stuff that I was referring to.
So if you're sitting in your stand facing out, he's a little bit to your left in the thick stuff. You can see him moving around about 60 yards out. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So he starts walking in towards me, and he hits one of the scrapes, which was incredible to watch him do. Like, because up until that point, like that season, I had just seen a bunch of like little bucks hitting scrapes, and just to see a deer of that size hit that scrape was like just really, really cool. So then he starts walking in, and he kind of looks like he's about to skirt around me and just kind of stay in that thick brush. And so I grunted at him a couple of times, and he just comes to a dead stop, doesn't move a muscle, is just still as can be. And he's still like that for probably a good 2-3 minutes. And I kept telling people it was 5 minutes, but I'm sure it probably felt like 5 minutes, but was really probably 2.
It's astonishing how long they can hold a pose. It is.
Oh my goodness. And not move a single muscle. And I think that almost made it worse for me, because then I could hear how loud my heart was, and my stomach started going. I hadn't really eaten anything during the day. And I was just like, oh, this buck is going to hear my heart. He's going to hear my stomach. He's going to take off. Like I could not get myself to just like calm down. And I was going through and having a self-talk, and was just like, get it together. Like, this is not the time to mess this up.
That's funny. Do you remember the grunt sequence that you used?
I don't.
Okay.
It's all a blur. Like,
right.
Seriously, I think it was like 3 short grunts. Like, I remember, I didn't do a whole lot of them. I just did like 3 short ones, I think. And I think that was also the case because I wanted to get my grunt tube down so I could hook up. Like, I mean, at that point, after he hit the scrape and he was where he was at, he had closed the distance to 30 yards.
Okay. How far away was the scrape?
Probably at 40.
Okay. So he's coming towards you, and is it still thick in there, or is it starting to open up?
Yeah. Okay. He was literally walking like the thick area just kind of lined the ridge, and he was just sticking right in that. Like, he was sticking right next to it, and actually after hitting the scrape dipped back into it. And so I mean, even at 30 yards, like, I didn't have a shot at him. And I was thinking, like, great, he's going to skirt right around me, and he's going to dip back down the hill, and that'll be the last I see of him.
As they usually do. Yeah.
Yep. So that's why I let out those 3 grunts, or however many I did. I know they were short grunts, but I couldn't tell you like how many and how separated they were, So he's still as can be. Well, then that nubbin buck ends up coming up onto the flat and comes up just within view of that buck, and that buck starts coming and walking towards that nubbin buck. And they're now almost dead left of me at like a straight angle, straight away. And I was like, okay, there's a tree to my left that has branches coming out. And I was like, either I'm about to put an arrow in a tree, or if he walks into this spot where there's an opening, I can probably get my arrow through there.
Okay.
I was like, but I was thinking, I got to be ready. Like, I need to draw back as soon as he steps behind this other tree ahead of it. And once he steps into that spot, I just need to let that arrow fly. And so sure enough, he ended up walking towards me and jumped this log and stepped right into that spot. And as soon as he stepped into that spot and opened up his shoulder, I just hit my trigger, and the arrow flew right through that area and hit him right in it actually hit him like, man, just right above the shoulder. I would say it was still in the shoulder blade. It cut through the shoulder blade and went down through his heart. Yeah. And then out his armpit on the right side.
Gotcha. So it's almost like it. How high up were you? About 20?
I was
15.
I'd say about 15.
Gotcha. So, and he was 30 yards out when you shot?
No. He had, at that point, he had come to about 15 yards.
So he's at 15 yards. You're 15 feet up. So you got a pretty sharp angle at that point.
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
coming
So like
down
I
on
said,
the shoulder blade. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
yeah. Yep. So it went straight down through him and straight out the bottom of his armpit. And, but the arrow itself had broken about maybe halfway. So I could see the fletching sticking out of his shoulder blade, but I couldn't tell. I mean, he donkey kicked right away and took off, and I couldn't really tell what kind of penetration I got. And I had actually had a really bad experience last season where I was so confident that I shot a deer similar to him, and I was confident that I had a perfect shot on him, and I was going to find him, and because the year previously had ran about 50 yards, swayed like he was going to drop, and then took off and kept running, and 400 yards of blood later, I never found him. And anyway, so I was like, after seeing my arrow sticking out of this deer, my heart plummeted, and I was just, doubting myself all over again and just kind of preparing myself for that anguish. But I saw him run downhill and lost sight of him. So that was the initial impact anyway.
Gotcha. And just a side note, I know many a good hunter that have taken those shots and that you described, thought they had the kill, and that buck lived. And not only did it live, but it lived years beyond that, because the pictures of that same buck years later with the hole that had since healed over. And so it happens. It happens a lot, actually. It happens more than you think. But they actually can take a pass through and keep on going. It's amazing what they can do.
Yeah, I noticed you interviewed Blake Garrett not too long ago.
That's right.
Yeah. So him and I were talking because he was showing me pictures the night that he shot his buck Dirty, and he had shot him the year prior and wasn't able to kill him. And he said after he shot him this year, he sent me a video of like when he was actually field dressing him.
Yep.
His lung had collapsed. One of his lungs that he hit, he had one lung to him. It collapsed and it almost fused to the side of his rib cage. And it's just like that deer was basically living on one lung.
Right.
And so, I mean, it's heartbreaking, but like I said, I mean, it's amazing what those deer can live through and what those bucks can survive. And
they're tough creatures.
Nobody ever wants that to happen. And anybody that knows me and followed that story knows I was just beating myself up about that experience for the past year. And so to have it come down this year and have almost the exact same thing happen, it was just like my confidence plummeted. I just was beside myself, and I just didn't know, because I didn't see him drop myself.
Yep.
That, like, with my own eyes, that I just doubted myself completely.
It is amazing how psychological those experiences for a hunter play in, because you're right. It creates self-doubt. It tears you up. Like, you feel so bad because you do care about these animals a lot. And the last thing that you really want is you don't want to inflict long-term pain on these animals. You want it to be quick and easy and done.
Yeah. You don't want them to suffer. Right. Yeah.
But talking to more and more hunters, that these pass-through shots are like a mosquito bite sometimes. These things. They're like, oh, what was that? God, and then they heal up, and then they're running around, rutting all over the place the next year, doing exactly the same things. And they took an entire arrow through their mid cavity. How is that possible? Yeah. But it's astonishing. So I think there's some comfort in knowing that these things are so tough that they can take a blow like that and still survive long beyond the shot. So it's hard to take, and you feel really bad because you think the worst. But in reality, it's like a mosquito bite, I guess, is what it comes down to in a lot of these pass-throughs where they do continue to live on. Otherwise, you would have found the deer.
Yeah. And my dad kind of tried to comfort me by saying, it happens to everybody. And if it's not, then they're not taking the shots or they're liars.
Right. That's right.
So.
Yep. I mean, I don't know a hunter alive that has not that has especially with an arrow that has killed or shot and killed every single deer that they shot at.
Yeah. Yep.
Or shot at and hit and thought they had to kill and didn't. I mean, it's happened over and over and over.
Yeah.
And to me too. I mean, it's happened to me. A few times, and it's just you don't love the scenario. It's the worst feeling in the world. But pretty guaranteed that those deer lived because A, they're tough. They're built for survival. They don't know that they shouldn't survive. They have no idea. They just keep on going. But they also have this incredible ability to heal with extremely high levels of vitamin K, which is like the ultimate vitamin for closing. And you would probably know this, right, from being in the medical field. The level of vitamin K is off the charts, so they clot quickly, and if you don't take out a vital, then they keep on going.
Yep. Yeah.
So, amazing story, Allison.
Thank you. Yeah, it's crazy how it all came together, and it was overwhelming when I finally did find him. And not that it definitely wasn't a long track job by any means, but I think what really made it was when my dad came to see him and help me drag him out. And I think just sharing that with my dad was definitely the best part of it.
Yeah, very cool. It's always fun to share it with somebody that you have so much respect for and has taught you a lot about.
Well, and having him there the past couple of years, he knows the work I've put in and you know, how much all of it means to me, and just to see him almost bask in that too.
Right.
Like, he feels that too. So, it was fun to have him there and have him see the deer before he headed for Kansas. He was leaving for Kansas the next morning, and he was like so worried that I was going to shoot a big one when he was gone, and that he would, you know, miss it all. And so I'm glad he was able to be there.
Do you have kids, Allison?
I don't.
Someday you'll understand that as a parent, you want to, if you're a deer hunter, yes, you want to have a big kill, but you feel as good, if not better, than you would feel for yourself when your child can do this. Like it's
that's
one of the
what
best.
He said.
Yeah, it's an amazing feeling, and you'll feel that someday. But yeah, it's an accomplishment. It feels like you did it. Like and you feel so good for that person that had that kill. It's a very special moment. That's awesome. So how far did the deer go?
And about 60, 70 yards.
Gotcha. So nice, easy flying.
Yeah, he just dipped right back into that thick stuff and ran right down the hill. And I could see blood the whole way, and I found the arrow broke off maybe 10 yards from the initial hit. And the arrow, actually, it was cool. I have it. It was signed by Michael Waddell.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, crap. Like, I saw how much arrow there was, and I was like, I didn't get good enough penetration, and I was just like heartbroken over it, and I kept following, and I was just like praying. I was like, I really hope I find this deer, and then when I finally did, I called my dad, and I was just freaking out.
That is so cool.
So, yeah,
I love it. Do you what did it gross score, green score?
Oh, green score was 173 and 6/8.
Wow, that's a corker.
Yeah,
beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful
and he field dressed was 228 pounds.
That's a big deer. That is a big mature whitetail.
I am so glad. That's another reason I'm glad my dad hadn't left for Kansas, because I would have been dragging him out. I don't think I would have got out of that woods until probably 4 o'clock in the morning if it hadn't been for my dad.
Inch by inch.
I mean, going up and over hills through thick stuff. I mean, it was a brutal drag just with the two of us. And so to have, I can't even imagine if I would have done it myself. It would have taken me all night for sure.
So no like 4-wheeler access or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
No.
And like what jet sled maybe? Like how'd you ended up pulling them out?
We tied a rope around the horns and then tied the rope around a thick stick, and we
Gotcha. Old
pulled
school.
him the whole way.
Old school. And that's definitely super traditional, and I love that. But I have found that the ice fishing jet sleds travel just as good over ice and snow as they do over grass and leaves and pine cones and everything else.
Well, I mean, we were literally, there were down trees that we were having to pull him up over, and
Yep.
that's how thick some of this stuff was.
Yeah.
And so it was quite the haul, and I definitely think it would have been nice to have like one of those deer carts at least by the time we got to the field edge.
Yep.
And like even once we got to the field edge, it was still a long haul all the way back to the vehicles, and with the snow, I don't think we would have got back to where we wouldn't have got back because it was all locked by crops too. So
Gotcha.
you couldn't really get in, unless you had farm equipment, but yeah, so it was a manual drag job the whole way, but I think investing in a deer cart might be in my future.
It does help. It does help.
Oh,
If you have the
absolutely.
right deer cart. I could probably send you one. I have one from a former sponsor that still sitting in my garage. It's still in the box.
Oh.
I can send that to you. It's pretty unique. It's called a rack packer. It's a
Interesting.
one wheeled device, and it's hauled some deer out for me. It's not great for all circumstances, but certainly good for moving gear and deer
Yep.
in and out in a much easier manner.
Yeah. Very
cool.
nice.
So I'm curious to learn about just a few of the devices and gear that you used during this hunt, just to try and get an idea for what you're actually using. Let's talk about your bow a little bit. What are you shooting for arrows and for a bow?
So the arrows I'm shooting are day 6, which I don't know if, I never know if people know what those are. I don't think they're as common. I know they're kind of newer to the market as opposed to like Victory or,
Right. Okay.
So I have day 6 arrows and then a Matthews Avail, which I love, and I really think is a testament to I only shoot 43 pounds, and I am just I think it's a combination between my arrows and the bow that really did it, and I was able to get the penetration that I did. But like I said, I only shoot 43 pounds, and it punched right through that deer, like right through the shoulder blade, right through, like you would think only shooting 43 pounds that's not even possible, but it worked. So,
Gotcha.
and then I have an HHA single pin sight, the Optimizer Light, and then the HHA Virtus Rest.
Gotcha. All right. Very nice. Nice setup. And the what are you using for things that you bring in the bag? Like what are you bringing into the woods with you for grunt calls, rattles, any other binoculars, rangefinders, things like that?
Yeah, I have Vortex Diamondback binoculars and Vortex Ranger HD rangefinder. And I was actually using the rangefinder I used that night that I shot that buck, just because I wanted to see, once I got back up top, I wanted to see how far I could shoot what my options were, because I didn't do that the first night that I had ever set that stand.
Gotcha.
And then I used a Primos grunt tube.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of what else.
What about for clothing? What's your suit set up? And I noticed in some of the pictures from the deer kill that you looks like you're using some scent lock products.
So actually those pictures were taken the next day because I wanted some daylight pictures with the buck.
Okay.
And that was right before I took him to the taxidermist. And I write for Big Time, and
Okay.
I used their food plot stuff this past season. I used their buck brunch and last stand, and so we were taking catalog pictures for that.
Gotcha.
But the night that I actually shot that buck, I was wearing a Sitka Fanatic suit. which was amazing. Like, I'm not the kind of person that I don't necessarily think that you need the brand new latest and greatest, but man, that Sitka suit was nice to have on that snowy day. It really kept me warm, so I'm super glad that I had that.
Yeah,
because my scent lock doesn't. It's not as heavy as that stuff is. So like I used to have to like I have a scent lock pullover, a scent lock early season jacket, and then a scent lock quote unquote late season jacket.
Yep.
And I used to have to layer all of that. And that night I was just wearing a pullover, my Vortex. I had a Vortex jacket on, and then my Sitka bibs and the jacket, and I was completely warm. And I only had 3 layers on top and base layers on the bottom. And I mean, it was a 30 degree day, and with the snow, it was just kind of, well, the wind is what made it more brutal, but so that's what I was wearing that day. And then I had muck boots on, which are my favorite. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that was my setup.
The right gear in certain conditions means a lot. It means you can stay longer. And even in colder, harsher weather, yes, definitely. But even in early season warm weather, if you overdress or you aren't wearing the right layering system, or so that you're covered, B, you're wearing something that isn't going to release lots of scent into the air, and that you're not perspirating too much in the warm weather early season, that matters too, because you can destroy a hunt simply by sweating too much or not wearing the right clothes into a scenario like that. Well, especially in Wisconsin, like our biggest problem, I think, is, and especially this time of year, I mean, it's cold here. Like, it's dropping down to I think it's going to be 20 degrees. I don't remember if that's this weekend. Yeah, this weekend it's dropping down to 20 degrees, and then the following week. So for everybody that's going to be out in the woods, I mean, it's going to be brutally cold, and what makes it worse is really the wind chill. Yep. So having warm gear when you live in Wisconsin is really a staple. I don't worry so much about my early season gear because it's such a short-lived time that I wear it. So I would rather invest in good cold season gear or late season gear than anything. And Wisconsin is definitely in that northern climate, right? Even more so than where I am in New Hampshire. So this is becoming, you have to prepare for the cold weather for sure. It's coming. Well, and we, it's funny because actually on Halloween when it snowed where I was hunting in the southern part of the state. And where I hunt in the northern part of the state, they didn't even get a single flake. Yeah, so it's been a little weird. It's been a little weird weather this year. We've had some warm fronts and then some deep cold fronts come through, and it's and of course you get the weather at some point, and eventually ends up where the rest of the country too. So, but it's been a little odd, like just the weather cycles so far this year. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. But that was kind of the nice thing about tagging a buck early, because then I'm like, oh good, now I don't have to sit through like days and days and days of brutal cold. Right. But boy, what a great day to just dial that all up. I mean, a good snowstorm, getting them moving, and boy, you couldn't have asked for a better scenario. No. I mean, I have zero regrets for how everything went down. I think it went down perfectly. It's just, I think, and honestly, like you said, hunting in the snow, there's just something about it. Like, it's a little magical at times. It really is. It truly has magic to it, I believe. Yep. I've always loved it. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Let me hit you with 10 rapid fire questions here, Allison, if I could. Sounds good. All right. What's your number one hunting tip of all time? Oh boy, number one hunting tip of all time. Don't worry, this is all recorded, so I'll always hit a bathroom before you go out. That's a great one. Especially as a female. Nobody has ever said that on this show. That is a great number one hunting tip. I love that one.
The only reason I thought of it was because that's totally what I did one morning. I have a long drive from where I live to where I was actually hunting. So it was like by the time I actually got over to the area I was hunting in, I was like, yeah, I should go now before I have to in the woods.
Brilliant. Absolutely great move. All right. We all have these things that try and kind of drive us crazy if we don't have them with us while we're in the hunt. Sometimes we leave it in the car, or truck, or leave it at home or at the camp. What's that one thing for you?
My grunt tube.
Yep, that's a good one. What's your biggest pet peeve in life?
In life?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, where do I begin? One thing that drives me absolutely bonkers is just oh goodness. I'm gonna switch and I'm gonna pick people that have their ringtone on like the loudest setting in any at any event, really.
Right. That's a good one.
Oh my goodness.
How old are you today, Allison?
28.
You're 28. What would you tell the 16-year-old Allison Rauscher, knowing what you know today about life?
Oh, wow. You are asking some really hard ones. I didn't expect these at all.
These are deep. These are deep questions.
Real deep. I would say to focus on school and don't focus on your social life. Just worry about having fun, but focus on school and don't worry so much about, the long term.
Gotcha. All right. You meet a stranger in a hotel lobby in a archery convention somewhere, and they ask you what you do for a living. What do you tell them?
I am a transplant nurse.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, I really like it.
Yeah, that's like serious nursing. That's no joke.
Yeah, it's different. I mean, every area has its every area I think is serious, but I like to think that we do some good work, and I enjoy the people that I get to work with, my coworkers and patients included.
Very cool. All right, what did you have for breakfast this morning?
Coffee.
Just a coffee.
Just coffee. I'm a coffee drinker. I have to have coffee every morning. And usually I love my breakfast, but this morning I didn't actually have any.
Gotcha. All right. You get your own billboard on the side of a highway. It's a blank canvas. You can put anything you want on it. What would it say?
It would probably be for some sort of conservation organization, mm-hmm. or a charity for maybe, or some sort of fundraiser for the children's hospital that is attached to the hospital that I work at.
That makes sense. I definitely can dig all of that. That's very good. All right. If I say the word successful to you, who's the first person that pops into your head and why?
Michael Waddell.
Michael Waddell.
Because he's built a brand, and he is so well-spoken but so down to earth. And I mean, I've met him a couple of times, and I mean, even without his show, he's just such a great influencer for the hunting industry. Yep. And I really, really respect him.
Nice. Very cool. What's a typical day in your life look like?
Probably waking up, going to work, and coming home and going to bed.
Okay. All right. Groundhog Day.
Or doing something hunting related, probably. Right. No matter what season, there's something I'm hunting or shooting or fishing or something outdoor related.
All right. And last question: what's a typical deer hunting day look like in your life?
I wake up before the sun comes up and get ready and drive out to the property, usually blaring some sort of music while, again, chugging coffee. And then as soon as I get out there, walking into the woods and actually continuing to sip coffee in the stand and enjoying the sun come up, enjoying listening to the woods come alive, and just, enjoying everything that the world has to offer that unfortunately not everybody gets to see, from dawn to dusk.
Very cool. All right, that's the 10 rapid fire questions. did it quite well, and I apologize for going so deep on that, but it's
no, that's okay. Like, I was expecting, like, would you rather do this or this?
Right,
like, those were the kind of things that I was expecting.
So these are some personality soul-searching kinds of questions, and no, you answered very well. So.
Okay.
Well, Alice, this has been a blast. I absolutely had a great time. We went way longer than I ever expected, and the story was tremendous, and the buck you kill was off the charts, exciting.
Yeah.
So,
thank you so much.
A lot of unique characteristics of that buck. So congratulations on the buck, and thanks for coming on. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was fun. I love talking hunting. I mean, even whether I get a deer or not, I just enjoy talking to other people that have similar hobbies and then have the same passions that I do.
I love hearing stories like this because you can tell that this is a hunter that is on her path. She is figuring out how to hunt and kill the bigger bucks that everybody wants to, and there's always a progression, right? There's something that you start with, you have a motivation, you get into it for your first year, you kind of, through trial and error, you start to figure this out, and then the patterns start to emerge. You start to figure out where the big bucks are living, what it looks like when they are, and then you set up on the right tree, on the right spot, at the right property. So all of it has to come together. But once you've got that formula, now you can do it over and over and over again. Doesn't make it any easier necessarily, but now you know what you're looking for. So we appreciate Allison coming on the show, and we wish her the best of luck going forward. Dusty, where can we find you when you're not hanging out here in the studios with me?
Shoot me an email, dusty@bigbuckregistry.com. You can look me up on Instagram and Twitter @ChasingAntler, Facebook.com/Chubby Tines Outdoors. Jay, where can the people reach out to you? Or you're not on the mic?
Likewise, you can shoot me an email, jay@bigbuckregistry.com, and you can visit us on Facebook, facebook.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Twitter, which is twitter.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Instagram, instagram.com/bigbuckregistry, and YouTube, which is youtube.com/bigbuckregistry. On YouTube, you can listen to all of our podcasts in their entirety. As far as videos are concerned, it's a boring video, but the audio content is there, so you can actually listen to our podcast. You can also listen to all of our live shows that we've done on Thursday nights when we do them, and we've gone back and re-interviewed a lot of our previous guests we had on the show just to put a face to a voice, let's put it that way. You can always listen to our show on other places as well, not just YouTube. We're found on Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and as an Amazon Alexa skill. Go to Alexa and say, Alexa, enable Big Buck Registry. And if you would like to submit a buck to our page for consideration and be featured on our page in front of 250,000 diehard deer hunting fans, all you have to do is go to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, and all of the instructions will be right there. I think that's pretty much everywhere we're at. I think that's a wrap, Dusty.
That's a whole lot of big buck, Jay.
Sure is. I'm Jay Scott.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
And this is the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.